The city was awake with the noise of cars, people rushing to work, and tall glass buildings shining in the morning light. In one of those tall buildings sat Mr. Rahman, a well-known CEO. He had everything people thought was success: wealth, respect, and power. But inside his house, behind the grand walls, lived a young girl named Aliyah, who carried a heart heavier than her age. Aliyah was only 12, but she had learned silence more than laughter. Her mother had passed away years ago, leaving behind unfinished stories, unfinished lullabies, and an unfinished language that only she and her mother shared. Sometimes Aliyah would whisper those half-remembered words at night, but they were broken, incomplete. Her father, though caring, was too busy with meetings, phone calls, and endless files. He worried for her, but he did not know how to sit down and listen. On the other side of the city, life was very different. Imran, a single father, lived in a small rented house with his son Omar, who was also 12. Imran worked 2 jobs, repairing machines during the day and driving a cab at night. Life was not easy, but their little home was full of warmth. Omar missed his mother, who had left the world when he was very young, but he never let his father feel his sadness. He often said, "We are a team, Baba. You work hard, and I'll study hard. One day things will be better." That morning, Omar walked to school with his worn-out bag, his shoes slightly torn but polished neatly. His school wasn't very far, but near the same area stood a private academy where children from rich families studied. Sometimes Omar would glance at that building, wondering what life was like behind those shiny gates. It was outside that academy where the first connection began. Aliyah was standing near the gate, waiting for the driver, but something about her eyes showed discomfort. Children around her laughed, played, and talked, but she stood still, holding her books tightly against her chest. Then a sudden sound startled her. A group of older students teased her for mispronouncing a word during class. They laughed, repeating it again and again. Aliyah's cheeks turned red, her hands trembling. She wanted to defend herself, but the words her mother had once taught her wouldn't come out completely. At that moment, Omar happened to pass by. He saw the group of children laughing and saw the girl lowering her head in shame. Omar, though shy, couldn't walk away. He stopped and said in a firm voice, "Why are you making fun of her? Everyone makes mistakes. Even you." The group looked at him, surprised. He wasn't from their school, his uniform was different, cheaper, but his voice was steady. They muttered something under their breath and walked away. Aliyah slowly raised her head. For the first time, someone had stood up for her. She looked at Omar with wide eyes, unsure whether to speak. He smiled a little and said, "Don't worry about them. Words are not something to be ashamed of. My mother used to say, words are like seeds. If you water them, they grow." Her eyes softened at his words. Something about the way he spoke reminded her of her mother, who also compared words to little seeds. Aliyah wanted to answer, but the half-words in her heart were difficult to shape. She whispered, My mother, she used to," and stopped. Omar didn't push her. He only nodded gently, as if he understood. Then he noticed the car approaching. "I think your driver is here," he said, stepping aside. Before getting in, Aliyah turned back and asked softly, What is your name?" "Omar," he replied. For the rest of the ride home, Aliyah kept repeating that name in her mind. It was the first time in a long while that someone had spoken to her without judgment, without pity. That night, Aliyah sat in her large but lonely room. She opened her notebook and wrote one line, Words are seeds. She underlined it again and again. It felt like a message from her mother, sent through a stranger. On the other side of the city, Omar told his father about the incident. Imran smiled proudly, patting his son's shoulder. "You did the right thing, Omar. Always remember, kindness costs nothing but gives much." Neither of them knew then that this small moment, a few words outside a school gate, would grow into something far greater. Aliyah, the anxious daughter of a powerful man, and Omar, the hopeful son of a struggling father, had just begun a journey written by fate itself. A journey where unfinished words would one day find their ending. The next morning, Aliyah sat at her study desk, staring at the notebook where she had written "Words are seeds." Her handwriting was neat, but her heart was restless. She kept hearing Omar's voice, steady, gentle, without mockery. It felt strange, because she barely knew him, yet his words had stayed longer than anything she had heard in months. At breakfast, her father, Mr. Rahman, glanced at her. He noticed she was eating quietly, her eyes distant. "Aliyah, is everything all right?" he asked softly. She hesitated. She wanted to tell him about the boy who had helped her, about the laughter of her classmates that still hurt, about the half-language her mother once whispered into her ears. But she only nodded and said, "I'm fine, Baba." Mr. Rahman sighed. He loved his daughter dearly, but he often felt helpless. He could sign contracts worth millions, lead meetings with confidence, but when it came to understanding his little girl's silence, he felt powerless. Meanwhile, in the smaller house across the city, Omar was helping his father wash dishes before school. Imran looked at him and said, "You thought about that girl yesterday?" Omar shrugged, drying a plate. "A little. She seemed lonely." Imran nodded. "Sometimes loneliness is heavier than poverty, my son. If you can be a friend to someone like that, you'll give them more than money ever can." Those words stayed with Omar. He didn't know if he would ever meet Aliyah again, but something inside him hoped he would. The universe seemed to listen. 2 days later, Omar's school arranged a small debate competition, and students from nearby private schools were invited. Omar, though nervous, was chosen by his teacher to represent his class. He walked into the hall with his second-hand shoes and nervous heart, but his eyes suddenly caught a familiar face, Aliyah. She sat in the audience, holding a notebook, her father seated beside her as the guest of honor. Aliyah's eyes widened when she saw him. She whispered Omar's name under her breath, as if reminding herself he was real. When it was Omar's turn to speak, he walked up to the stage. His topic was simple: the power of words. He spoke with honesty, not with polished grammar or perfect style, but with heart. "My mother once told me," Omar began, "that words are like small seeds. If you speak kindly, you plant flowers in someone's heart. If you speak harshly, you plant thorns. Every day, we choose what we plant." His voice was steady, his eyes sincere. The hall was silent, even the wealthy children who had mocked others listened quietly. And in that silence, Aliyah's eyes filled with tears. She felt as if Omar was not just speaking to the crowd, but to her, to the girl whose mother's words had remained unfinished. When the competition ended, Omar didn't win the first prize, but he won something else. Aliyah found courage to walk toward him. She held her notebook close and whispered, "You spoke like my mother." Omar looked at her kindly. "Maybe your mother planted those seeds in you. You just need someone to help water them." For the first time, Aliyah smiled, a small, uncertain smile, but genuine. She wanted to say more, but the words tangled again. She pressed her lips and lowered her eyes. Omar, sensing her struggle, didn't rush her. Instead, he said, "It's okay. You don't need to finish your words with me. I'll still understand." Those simple lines touched her deeply. Nobody had ever told her that before. From that day on, Aliyah waited for opportunities to see Omar. Sometimes outside the school gate, sometimes during small events where their schools crossed paths. She began carrying the notebook her mother had given her long ago, the one filled with half-written poems and unfinished phrases. Slowly, she started writing new words in it, words she heard from Omar. Mr. Rahman, however, noticed the changes. His daughter had started humming again, sometimes even smiling. One evening, he peeked into her room and saw her writing eagerly. It warmed his heart, but it also filled him with curiosity. What had caused this sudden change? He asked gently, "Aliyah, you seem happier these days. Did you make a new friend?" She froze for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Yes, Baba." Mr. Rahman wanted to know more, but he didn't push. Instead, he thought to himself, whoever this friend is, they've given my daughter something I could not piece. On the other side, Omar told his father about the notebook Aliyah carried. "She writes the way my mother used to speak," Omar said. "Like she wants to finish something that was left undone." Imran placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Then maybe, Omar, you are meant to help her finish it." Neither Aliyah nor Omar fully understood it yet, but their connection was not ordinary. It was not built on wealth, status, or school. It was built on unfinished words, on silence, and on the courage to understand without demanding. And in that quiet bond, something beautiful had already begun to grow. Mr. Rahman had always believed that he could protect his daughter with wealth and comfort. His house was big, his cars expensive, and her school among the best in the city. But no matter how much he gave her, Aliyah's heart remained quiet. Until now. Lately, he noticed small but important changes. Aliyah smiled more often, her notebooks were filling with words, and sometimes he even heard her humming in the garden. To him, this was a miracle. Yet, behind that happiness, a question kept troubling his mind. Who was responsible for this sudden light in her life? One evening, when he asked again, Aliyah hesitated. She clutched her notebook and whispered, "It's a friend, Baba." Mr. Rahman tried to smile, but worry stirred in his chest. He had always been cautious about who entered his daughter's world. She was delicate, easily hurt, and still living with the loss of her mother. Whoever this friend was, they had become important to her. He needed to know more. The answer came sooner than expected. A week later, Aliyah was invited to a school event, and as the chief guest, Mr. Rahman accompanied her. He sat in the front row, applauding politely as students performed. During one performance, he noticed his daughter leaning forward, her eyes shining with attention. He followed her gaze and saw a boy on stage, simple uniform, second-hand shoes, but a steady confidence in his voice. It was Omar. Mr. Rahman didn't know him, but the way Aliyah watched the boy told him everything. This was her friend. After the event, as people moved about, Omar came toward Aliyah with a gentle smile. They spoke briefly, Aliyah shyly showing him her notebook. Mr. Rahman stood a few steps away, watching carefully. Omar's words were soft, but Aliyah's reactions were clear. She was listening with her heart, not just her ears. Later, in the car, Mr. Rahman asked calmly, "Aliyah, that boy, is he the friend you mentioned?" Her cheeks warmed. She nodded, whispering, "Yes, Baba." Silence filled the car. Mr. Rahman looked out the window, deep in thought. He didn't want to take away the happiness his daughter had found, but he couldn't help worrying. Who was this boy? Where did he come from? Could he be trusted? That night, while Aliyah slept, Mr. Rahman sat in his study, staring at the city lights. His late wife had always told him, "Aliyah needs someone who will understand her unfinished words." Was this boy the one she had unknowingly described? Still, the father in him couldn't rest without answers. Meanwhile, in their small rented home, Omar shared the day's events with his father. Imran listened quietly, his eyes softening. "So, the CEO himself was there?" he asked. "Yes," Omar said, his voice low. "He saw me with Aliyah." Imran placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Be respectful, my son. That man carries the weight of his world. But remember, don't let his power make you feel small. Kindness has no status." The next morning, Mr. Rahman made a decision. He asked his driver to find out where the boy lived. He wasn't planning to scold him or forbid the friendship, but he needed to understand the family behind the boy who had entered his daughter's heart. When the driver reported back, Mr. Rahman was surprised. Omar lived in a small house in an old part of the city. His father was a mechanic and sometimes drove a cab. They weren't wealthy, yet people in the neighborhood spoke highly of them. "The boy is polite, hard-working, and studies well," the driver said. "The father is honest, though life hasn't been easy for him." Mr. Rahman leaned back in his chair, conflicted. He respected honesty and hard work, but he couldn't ignore the vast gap between their worlds. Could two children from such different lives truly understand each other? That weekend, Aliyah asked her father if she could attend a small book fair organized in a community park. To her surprise, he agreed, secretly hoping to see more for himself. At the park, children ran about with balloons, stalls sold second-hand books, and music played softly. Aliyah's eyes brightened when she spotted Omar. He waved at her, and for a moment, the heavy walls around her heart fell away. She showed him a book she had found, and together they flipped through the pages, laughing quietly. Mr. Rahman stood at a distance, watching. He expected to feel anger or disapproval, but instead, he felt something else: relief. His daughter was smiling, freely, without hesitation. He had not seen that smile in years. Still, his doubts remained. After they returned home, he asked gently, "Aliyah, do you know much about Omar? About his family?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but I don't need to, Baba. He listens. He understands what I can't finish saying." Those words struck Mr. Rahman deeply. He realized that what his wealth and power couldn't provide, this boy had given understanding. That night, as he sat in his study again, he whispered to his late wife's photograph, "Maybe you were right. Maybe our daughter needed someone who speaks the language you couldn't finish teaching her." For the first time, Mr. Rahman began to see Omar not as a stranger, but as a bridge between his daughter's silence and the words she longed to complete. But even as hope stirred in his heart, doubt still lingered. Could this bond survive the distance between two different worlds? Mr. Rahman could not shake the image of his daughter smiling in the park with Omar. It filled him with comfort, but also unease. He knew the boy was kind, yet his protective heart needed more certainty. Aliyah was fragile, her happiness too rare to risk. He decided it was time to meet Omar's father. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, as Mr. Rahman's car drove past the old part of the city, he asked the driver to stop near the small workshop that belonged to Imran. The place was modest, tools hanging on the wall, machines scattered around, and a faint smell of grease in the air. Inside, Imran was repairing a broken motor with tired but steady hands. His shirt was worn, his face marked with years of struggle, yet his eyes carried calm dignity. Mr. Rahman stepped inside, his expensive shoes clicking against the rough floor. Imran looked up, surprised, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Assalamu alaikum," he greeted politely. "Wa alaikum salam," Mr. Rahman replied, his voice formal. "You must be Imran." "Yes," Imran said, straightening his back. "And you are?" "I am Rahman, Aliya's father." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Imran understood why the man had come. Their children's friendship had not gone unnoticed. Imran offered him a chair, even though the wooden seat was old and chipped. Mr. Rahman hesitated, then sat, his polished suit looking out of place in the humble workshop. "I know your son," Mr. Rahman began slowly. "Omar has been a friend to my daughter. She speaks of him often." Imran's eyes softened. "Yes, Omar told me the same. He said your daughter carries a notebook with her mother's words." Mr. Rahman looked down, his throat tightening. "Her mother passed when she was very young. Since then, Aliya has lived with silence more than laughter. But lately, I see light in her again. I cannot ignore the role your son has played." Imran listened carefully, nodding. "Omar has grown without his mother too. Perhaps that is why he understands your daughter. Children like them, they don't need grand words, only hearts that listen." The simplicity of those words touched Mr. Rahman more than he expected. For years, he had believed only wealth and protection could shield Aliya. Yet here was a man who had nothing but honesty and still gave his son the wisdom to heal another child's heart. But Mr. Rahman's doubts had not vanished. He leaned forward. "Imran, forgive my directness, but you know our worlds are very different. My daughter is fragile. I fear disappointment may break her further. Can your son truly be the friend she needs?" Imran met his gaze calmly. "Sir, I cannot promise the future. But I can tell you this: Omar is sincere. He does not see your daughter as the CEO's child. He sees her as Aliya, a girl who needs a friend. If she finds comfort in him, then perhaps that is enough for now." The honesty in his voice disarmed Mr. Rahman. There was no attempt to impress, no sign of envy. Only truth. Just then, Omar entered the workshop, his school bag still on his shoulders. He froze at the sight of Mr. Rahman, his eyes widening. "Aliya's father," he whispered. Mr. Rahman looked at him carefully. The boy was simple, his shoes worn, but his posture respectful. He lowered his head politely. "Assalamu alaikum, sir." "Wa alaikum salam," Mr. Rahman replied. For a moment, their eyes met, the powerful CEO and the boy who had given his daughter back her smile. Imran broke the silence. "Omar, this is Aliya's father. He came to meet us." Omar nodded shyly, clutching the strap of his bag. Mr. Rahman studied him a little longer, then finally spoke. "Your words, they have reached my daughter in ways I could not. For that, I thank you." Omar's cheeks turned red. He didn't know how to respond, so he simply said, "I only listen, sir." Those simple words reminded Mr. Rahman of what Aliya had once said: he understands what I can't finish saying. After a while, Mr. Rahman stood. Thank you for your time, Imran. I will not keep you from your work. Imran walked him to the door. Sir, I may not have wealth, but I do know one truth. Children are like fragile glass. They don't care about gold or silver, they only need hands that won't drop them. Mr. Rahman paused, those words echoing in his mind. He extended his hand, and Imran shook it firmly. Two fathers from two different worlds, united by the same concern, the happiness of their children. As Mr. Rahman's car drove away, Omar turned to his father nervously. Did I do something wrong? Imran smiled gently. No, my son. You did something very right. You gave someone back their voice. That night, Mr. Rahman sat in his study again, staring at his late wife's photograph. I met the boy's father, he whispered softly. He is not rich, but he is rich in honesty. Maybe, just maybe, our daughter is safe with them. But even as comfort entered his heart, another thought followed. The world does not always accept bonds that cross such distances. And Mr. Rahman knew, sooner or later, that challenge would come. The bond between Aliyah and Omar grew slowly, like a small plant learning to stretch toward the sun. They did not meet every day, but whenever they did, Aliyah carried her notebook, and Omar listened with quiet patience. She would show him half-finished lines her mother had written, and he would gently suggest words that could complete them. Sometimes they sat silently, letting the breeze carry their thoughts, and sometimes they laughed softly over small things. For Aliyah, these moments were like drops of rain in a long drought. For Omar, they were lessons in compassion, learning how even simple words could heal deep wounds. But the world around them was not as kind. One morning, Aliyah overheard two of her classmates whispering. Do you know who she talks to? That boy, he isn't even from our school. His father fixes machines. Imagine that, the CEO's daughter, sitting with a mechanic's son. They giggled, covering their mouths. Aliyah's chest tightened. She wanted to tell them to stop, but the words froze, as they always did when fear gripped her. She walked away quickly, hiding her face in her notebook. The same day, Omar faced something similar. At his school, a group of older boys teased him. So, you're friends with the rich girl now? Do you think she'll invite you to live in a palace? Or maybe buy you new shoes? They laughed loudly, but Omar clenched his fists, choosing silence instead of anger. Later, he told his father about it. Imran listened, his face calm. Son, people will always talk. Some will envy, some will mock, some will not understand. But if your heart is pure, you don't need to answer them. Let your actions speak. Those words gave Omar strength, but he worried about Aliyah. Would she be able to handle the whispers around her? The answer came a few days later. At the book fair's closing event, Aliyah and Omar met again. She looked quieter than usual, her shoulders slightly bent. Omar noticed immediately. Did something happen? He asked gently. Aliyah hesitated, then whispered, they laugh, because of you. Omar's chest tightened. Because of me? She nodded slowly. They say. I shouldn't talk to you. That we are, different. Her voice broke at the last word. For a moment, Omar looked down, hurt washing over him. But then he took a deep breath and said, Aliyah, do you know what my father always tells me? He says people may live in different houses, wear different clothes, or eat different food. But inside, every heart needs the same thing: kindness. If others can't see that, it's their blindness, not ours. Aliyah looked at him, her eyes trembling. He added softly, if you want, I can step away. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she spoke with a firmness he hadn't seen before. No, don't go. Those 3 words carried more weight than anything she had said before. They weren't complete sentences, but Omar understood them fully. She didn't want to lose the only friend who had given her unfinished language a place to breathe. At home that night, Aliyah sat in her room, clutching her notebook. She thought of the cruel whispers, but then she thought of Omar's steady voice. Slowly, she wrote a new line under her mother's unfinished poem, different houses, same hearts. It was the first time she had ever dared to complete her mother's words on her own. Meanwhile, Mr. Rahman noticed his daughter's growing courage. She had started to speak a little more during meals, even sharing small thoughts. His heart swelled with hope, but he also sensed the danger of society's judgment. At a business dinner, one of his associates mentioned casually, I heard your daughter has made a rather unusual friend. People talk, you know. Mr. Rahman's jaw tightened. He forced a polite smile, but inside, he burned with both anger and fear. He didn't care for society's gossip, but he knew how cruel the world could be. He wanted to protect Aliyah, yet he also knew forbidding her from seeing Omar would only break her spirit again. That night, he visited her room. She was asleep, her notebook resting beside her pillow. He picked it up gently and flipped through the pages. His heart stopped when he saw the new line she had written. Different houses, same hearts. A lump formed in his throat. He whispered to himself, she is finding her voice, and it is because of him. The next day, he called Imran secretly. They met again at the workshop. Mr. Rahman's face was firm. The children are being noticed. People are talking. Imran nodded calmly. I expected this. The world is quick to judge what it does not understand. Rahman sighed. I fear for Aliyah. I don't want her heart to be broken again. Imran placed a hand on his shoulder. Then let us stand together, as fathers. Not against the children's bond, but to protect it. If our children have found peace in each other, why should we let the world take it away? For the first time, Mr. Rahman felt less alone in his struggle. 2 fathers, once strangers, now stood united by the same purpose to shield the fragile happiness of their children. But neither of them knew that the whispers of the world were only the beginning. Stronger storms were waiting ahead. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers around Aliyah and Omar did not fade. In fact, they grew louder. Some classmates mocked, some teachers looked with quiet disapproval, and even neighbors began to gossip. One afternoon at school, Aliyah sat quietly in the library, tracing her fingers over her notebook. She was writing slowly, but her hands trembled. A group of girls approached, their voices sharp. So, one said, smirking, you still meet that boy? The one who doesn't belong here. Another laughed. Maybe he's using you. Why else would a poor boy spend time with the CEO's daughter? The words stung like thorns. Aliyah wanted to shout, to tell them they were wrong, but her voice betrayed her. She closed the notebook tightly and walked away, her eyes burning with tears. That evening, she told her father what happened. For the first time, her words came out with emotion, though still broken. They say, he is wrong for me. Mr. Rahman's chest ached. He wanted to protect her, to silence the cruel voices around her. But he remembered Imran's words, children are like fragile glass. They don't care about gold or silver, they only need hands that won't drop them. He realized he could not fight her battles for her forever. She needed courage of her own. Meanwhile, Omar was facing his own trials. At his school, the teasing grew harsher. Some called him the rich girl's charity project. Others whispered that he was pretending to be kind just to gain favors. Omar clenched his fists but refused to answer. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Am I making her life harder? He whispered to himself. Imran, sitting nearby, answered gently, Omar, storms come to test the strength of a tree. If your friendship with Aliyah is true, it will stand. But if you doubt yourself, she will feel that too. The real test came during a school assembly a week later. Parents, teachers, and students gathered in the hall for a special event. The principal invited selected students to share a thought or reading in front of everyone. To Aliyah's shock, her name was called. Her knees went weak. She had never spoken in front of a large crowd. The principal smiled encouragingly. Aliyah, you may share anything you wish, a poem, a thought, or even a line you love. Her heart pounded as she walked to the stage, clutching her notebook. Whispers filled the hall. Some students smirked, expecting her to stammer or remain silent. Aliyah's eyes scanned the crowd and then, she saw him. Omar, sitting quietly with his classmates at the back, watching her with steady eyes. In that moment, she remembered his words, it's okay. You don't need to finish your words with me. I'll still understand. Her trembling eased. She opened the notebook and looked down at the unfinished lines her mother had once written. Slowly, she began to read aloud. Her voice was soft, uneven at first, but it carried. My mother wrote these words. She could not finish them. But today, I will try. Gasps ran through the hall. Teachers leaned forward, surprised. Mr. Rahman, seated in the front row, gripped his hands tightly, tears forming in his eyes. Aliyah continued, halting but determined. She said, words are like seeds. If we water them with kindness, they grow. Different houses, same hearts. The silence that followed was heavy, powerful. Then, a wave of applause filled the hall. Some clapped politely, but others clapped with genuine respect. For the first time in her life, Aliyah had spoken in front of everyone. Not perfectly, not fluently, but with courage. And in the back row, Omar's eyes shone with pride. After the event, many people praised her. Some still whispered, but their voices were drowned by the echo of her bravery. Mr. Rahman hugged her tightly. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. Later that evening, Aliyah met Omar outside the school gate. She handed him the notebook and said softly, today I spoke, because you believed. Omar shook his head gently. No, Aliyah. You spoke because you found your own courage. I only reminded you it was already there. For the first time, Aliyah's smile was not shy or small. It was wide, bright, and free. At home, Mr. Rahman sat in his study, reflecting on the day. His daughter had found her voice, but he knew the journey wasn't over. Society would still whisper, people would still question. But something had changed forever. Aliyah was no longer silent. And deep down, Mr. Rahman began to accept a truth he had resisted. Sometimes, the people we least expect are the ones chosen to bring light into our lives. But as the night grew darker, he also sensed another truth. The louder Aliyah's voice became, the stronger the world's resistance might grow. The storm was not over. It was only beginning. The days after Aliya's speech were brighter, yet the whispers of society had not vanished. Some classmates were still curious, some teachers still skeptical, but now, Aliya's confidence had grown. She walked with her head held higher, her notebook always close, and her heart lighter. Omar noticed the change immediately. He could see the courage she had discovered, not because of him, but because she had chosen to step into her own voice. Yet, a new challenge awaited. One afternoon, a school project paired students from different backgrounds together. Aliya and Omar were chosen to collaborate. It was exciting but also terrifying. Their project required presenting a small play in front of the school. The script involved dialogue, timing, and confidence, everything Aliya had struggled with. As they sat together in the library, Aliya's hands trembled. "Omar, what if I forget my words?" she whispered. Omar smiled reassuringly. "Then I'll remember them for you. But you will speak them, because they are yours." They worked together for hours, practicing their lines, laughing at mistakes, and encouraging each other. Aliya began to see that she could finish what her mother had left incomplete: her language, her words, her courage. The day of the performance arrived. The auditorium was full. Parents, teachers, and students watched as Aliya and Omar took the stage. Some people whispered about the unusual pairing. Some wondered if the girl would falter. Aliya felt her heart pounding like a drum. She looked at Omar. His eyes met hers, calm and steady. That single look reminded her of every conversation, every shared notebook, every unspoken promise of understanding. The play began. Lines were exchanged, movements coordinated, and slowly, Aliya found herself speaking freely. Her voice wavered at first, but Omar's presence beside her gave her strength. The dialogue flowed, and for the first time, she could finish her mother's words in public: "Words are seeds. We plant them with love, we water them with hope, and they grow in hearts, even when unseen." The auditorium fell silent for a moment. Then, applause erupted, not just polite, but sincere. Teachers and students, even those who had mocked earlier, were impressed. Mr. Rahman, seated in the front row, felt tears well up in his eyes. He had never seen his daughter shine like this. After the performance, Aliya and Omar stepped off the stage. She clutched her notebook tightly. I did it," she whispered. Omar smiled warmly. "Yes. You did it all by yourself. I only walked beside you." That evening, as they walked home together, Aliya said softly, "Omar, my mother's words. I can finish them now. Because of you, I can speak." He shook his head gently. "No, Aliya. It was always in you. I only reminded you how strong you are." Across the city, Mr. Rahman watched the two children from a distance. He realized something profound: wealth, status, and protection could never give Aliya what Omar had given her: understanding, trust, and friendship. And now, seeing the results, he knew that the two children had created a world of their own, one that no whispers or judgments could easily destroy. Later that night, Aliya opened her notebook. She wrote a final line under her mother's unfinished words: "I spoke, I finished, I am heard." Omar, sitting nearby, watched her with pride. He did not need to speak, the silence between them was filled with understanding. They had both learned the same lesson: words are powerful, but courage, empathy, and trust make them unforgettable. The following week, at home, Mr. Rahman called Imran. They met again at the small workshop. Both fathers smiled, a quiet respect passing between them. "Your son has given my daughter more than I ever could," Mr. Rahman admitted. Imran nodded. "And your daughter has shown mine what courage can do." Together, they have grown. They shook hands firmly. Neither wealth nor social status mattered now. What mattered was the bond that had changed two children's lives forever. From that day, Aliyah spoke more freely at home, at school, and even in public. She still carried her notebook, but it was no longer for unfinished words. It was for dreams, stories, and the language she had finally learned to complete. Omar and Aliyah continued to meet, their friendship growing stronger. They laughed, they shared, and they helped each other face challenges. The world still had its opinions, but it could no longer touch the courage and love that had taken root between them. Years later, when they looked back, they remembered the first day they met outside the school gate. A simple act of kindness, a few words spoken with patience, and the seeds of trust had grown into something extraordinary. And through it all, the language her mother had never finished was finally complete, not just in words, but in understanding, in heart, and in life. The journey had been long, the obstacles many, but in the end, the power of listening, believing, and caring had created a world where words, no matter how unfinished, could bloom. And in that world, Aliyah and Omar thrived not because of wealth, status, or chance, but because they had learned to speak the language of the heart.